Good morning and welcome to the ISO Board of Governors General Session meeting. Please note that all virtual audio connections are in listen-only mode. Attendees will have the opportunity to comment verbally during time allotted for public comment. You can click the raise hand icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen, or if you're not logged into Zoom, you're dialed in on the phones, you can dial #2 to enter the public comment queue. And a reminder that this call is being recorded. With that, I'll turn the call over to Severin Borenstein, Chair, ISO Board of Governors. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and welcome to the ISO Board of Governors General Session for May of 2025. We have a full agenda, a lot of discussion of transmission. But before we get to all that, Roger has some tasks.
I do. I have some very important business that allows us to start the meeting officially, and that would be the roll call and notice of a quorum. And so let's start with you, Chair Borenstein.
I am here.
You are. Vice Chair Edo.
I am here also.
Good to see. Governor Galetova. Governor Leslie.
Present.
And Governor Shorey.
Here.
We have several here, several present, and we have a quorum. And with that, we may proceed. And let me also explain the public comment process. I understand we already have one public comment card for the board for item number 7, and that has been provided to the chair. And for those who are attending as to the public comment, attending virtually, excuse me, for the public comment, we will reach out to the operator in order to queue those up at the appropriate time. And back to you, Chair Borenstein, for any opening remarks.
Did I drop the ball that we were supposed to ask for public comment?
No, that's after this. So if you had any opening comments for the meeting.
I think I made my opening comments. So
okay, then we can go right to agenda item number 1, which is our general public comment. And that is for anyone who has public comments that are not related to the items on the agenda today. This is your opportunity to make those comments. I see none in the room, but Marilyn, if you can check to see if there are any online.
Okay, no raised hands at this time.
Thank you very much. So then we will move on to the CEO report.
Actually,
Elliot.
we're going to, right before that, we're going to do the minutes for the March 26th. So you're stuck with me for at least one more item, and that is whether we can get a motion for the March 26, 2025 general session minutes for the ISO Board of Governors. Can I have a motion, please?
Move.
Thank you, Mary. And a second?
Second.
Oh, I think Jan beat you out on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Governors. And let me give it back to you now, Chair Borenstein. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Roger, for keeping me on track. So now we will turn to Elliot for the CEO report.
Thank you very much, Chair Borenstein, Vice Chair Edo, and Governors. It's great to see you all in person and to see both our Chair and Vice Chair in their Hawaiian shirts. We know we're getting closer to summer. I think by next time we meet, we'll all probably be in similar apparel. So thank you for carrying the spirit of summer. And I have a number of items to cover this morning from my CEO report. I think there's quite a bit going on. I think merits just discussing, and of course, starting with summer, which is right around the corner. I think we know, as we've seen from our loads and resource assessment, it's likely that we're headed into another warm summer. And as a matter of fact, what the meteorologists are telling us right now is that big ridge of high pressure that was centered over Texas the last couple of summers looks like it may be moving a little bit further west this year, sitting a little bit more over our region. And so the probability of broader western-wide temperatures, I think, is a little bit higher this year. We do still see some potential for diversity along the coasts of California, but it's likely to be a hot summer, likely coming in hot in the earlier part of the summer, maybe not quite as intense in the latter part of the summer, which means readiness, of course, is at a real premium. We, of course, these last several weeks have completed our tabletop exercises, both within the state, with the utilities, with the regulatory agencies, the governor's office, et cetera. And then earlier in May, we also held our fifth annual Summer Readiness Reliability Roundtable, where we pull together many of the balancing authorities from across the West and take a look at the supply-demand picture across the different supply basins, take a look at the condition of the transmission system, and basically kind of do another check just to make sure that we're as prepared as possible going into summer and really testing all the different communication protocols, et cetera. So I feel like we're in good shape in terms of readiness. In terms of the numbers, of course, every year, and it's just back in May, on May 5th, we published our 2025 summer loads and resources assessment, which is our 1 in 10 loss of load expectation analysis, which showed us going into summer with a surplus of about 1,450 megawatts. So that is a good look. Of course, that's just tells us it's not an indication of the distance between the going into a stage 3 type of condition, but when we would start having to rely on the tools that are available as we move into EEA watches, into EEA 1s and 2s. So we do have some additional margin. We continue to have a pretty healthy stack of strategic reserve resources as a second line of defense this summer. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a summer where we're going to have to really watch out for the extreme simultaneous events. I think that, as we know, is always, these last couple of years have continued to break records west-wide in terms of WEC numbers. And so that ultimately, because we're woven into the interconnection, is what we need to watch out for. So, but really appreciate all the efforts, and I think we're about as prepared as we could be. Turning to some of the market issues, as you know, as we previewed in our last meeting back in March, we've been working very extensively with stakeholders on congestion revenue allocation issues for the ISO's extended day-ahead market. We were originally intending to bring the proposals as a decisional item for this month's session, but we've moved it out to allow for some additional time to work with stakeholders. This is an issue that arose during the PacifiCorp filing of their EDAM tariff, and we've decided, to really sit down and try to address some of the transitional issues. At the end of the day, the extra time these next several weeks is going to give us time to explore further some of the enhancements that were suggested and supported by stakeholders in the last round of stakeholder comments, including consideration of supporting parallel flow congestion revenue allocation based on economically bid schedules. And this is also going to allow for further discussions on the effects on the proposal of congestion revenue rights provided within the ISO balancing area as requested by stakeholders. We have a lot of people at the table. That's an important transitional issue, and I think taking this extra time. So the ISO earlier this week published a revised draft final proposal that's informed by the comments. We'll be hosting another stakeholder workshop to discuss any further revisions, followed by a comment period, and then a market notice being published with the additional schedule details. And just wanted to thank all the folks who have rolled up their sleeves to help us really try to get this issue on a good trajectory. And I feel very confident we're going to be bringing you back something later in June with a good level of support. And thanks to the team for fitting a line through all those different perspectives. I just wanted to note, as I've mentioned in my CEO report in the last couple of days, as we've been reviewing the policy roadmap, just wanted to nod to all of the stakeholders who've come to the table and helped us kind of reprioritize kind of all the different initiatives. We are sensitive to the fact that there's a lot going on right now, and it's important to make sure that we've got a sustainable pace of initiatives, not only certainly for us internally, but equally, if not more importantly, for stakeholders who have to also resource all of these things. And thanks to the team at the Regional Issues Forum who've really come to the table to help us with that reprioritization. A couple of milestones back on April 2nd. FERC did accept the ISO's tariff amendment that supports implementation of the West-wide Governance Pathways Step 1 proposal. Just as a reminder, Step 1 moves the primary decision-making authority to the WEM governing body and introduces a new dual filing process if the two governing bodies can't agree on a proposed tariff filing regarding our energy markets. And with that dual filing option, the two governing bodies could approve alternative proposals filed at FERC as co-equals only after other steps are taken to reach an agreement. And then FERC could either approve either one or potentially adopt elements of each. This change, as you know, will, along with some of the other changes associated with the Step 1 proposal that did not actually require FERC approval, will take effect once the conditions regarding participation in EDAM are met, and we're expecting that to happen here probably in the relatively near future. So excited to get to that 70% participation threshold in the short term. And of course, we are all very actively watching the progress of Senate Bill 540, the Pathways Initiative. It works its way through the California legislature. Here at the CAISO, we continue to maintain sort of a posture of being available for technical support on the initiative, and we'll continue to do that as the very broad coalition of support continues to work that and try to make sure that keep that on track. So appreciate the incredible number of people that are leaning in there, and will continue to stay in a supportive posture. Of course, later this morning, we will be discussing the 2024-2025 transmission plan. Really excited for that discussion, and in advance, really appreciate all the people that have leaned in. Neil Miller, his entire team, and just a lot of stakeholder engagement. You know, this, as you guys know, this is something that continues to be just a central piece of the strategy for the CAISO to make sure that, you know, we have a healthy inventory of deliverability available today. And we've just last year onboarded an all-time record of new resources onto the grid, over 7,000 megawatts of new resources on the grid last year, but we have to maintain that momentum. And so the far-sighted transmission planning and all the other coordination is really essential. I did want to mention one other element that's unique that's about this plan, particularly given just across the board the concerns around affordability here in California. And that is that in addition to the 31 projects that are, you know, have a heavy, reliability focus for this particular plan, which with a price tag of, close to $5 billion, the plan also recommends a nice number of upgrades using grid enhancing technologies that can enhance transmission capacity, at a fraction of the cost of new lines. And, I want to point out a couple of things, as I mentioned in this is a major issue inside California, right? We want to make sure that we feel the responsibility as a 501c3 public benefit corporation to come to the table with the least cost transmission plan. Every time Assembly Bill 2079 signed into law in 2024 does require the CAISO, following approval of the annual transmission plan, to submit a report to the CPUC and the relevant legislative committees outlining the grid enhancing technologies in the plan and how they will actually save costs or additional transmission build out. And that report will ultimately be completed and submitted at the appropriate time. But I want to say that the 2024-25 plan includes a significant number of upgrades using advanced conductors. The plan also includes a status report in Chapter 8 on 21 projects improved in past plans that deploy flow control, advanced conductor, and dynamic reactive support technologies. So I wanted just to reiterate that we really, to Neil and the whole team, really continuing to really dig deep to look for the applications of the more sophisticated technologies so that we can make sure that we're using our existing grid to its maximum capability and trying to make sure that we're producing the most cost-effective plans. Finally, just a couple notes. This week, we had two nice pieces of news. We've had both the Turlock Irrigation District and IID take that next steps to join our energy markets. Really fabulous. And for those of you who've been around the California energy landscape for many, many years, as we've reached out and built collaborative relationships across the board, it's wonderful for the first time to have all of the balancing authorities in California committed to participating in our energy markets. Really appreciate that. Both Turlock and IID, and also, of course, super excited that LA and Bank SMUD continue to be such fabulous partners for us, and just builds a wonderful complement to all of our broad regional partners across the West as well. And then, of course, building on that, because just given that the Western energy imbalance market really is the foundation stone upon which we've built all of this. We had another really strong Q1 of 2025, $369.3 million of financial benefits to participants, and bringing the cumulative total tantalizingly close to $7 billion since inception. So as we move forward and as the West continues to evolve, maintaining the value of that real-time energy market that I think has just proven so essential, not only to lowering costs, but helping to maintain reliability during stress grid conditions, is just going to be a central thesis of what we'll be doing. So thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity for the comments and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Elliot. This was very comprehensive. Congratulations on the milestone, all balancing authorities. present and accounted for and participating in the market. That is a big deal. And congratulations to the team. And that will go a long way to sending a signal, the $7 billion combined, that this is an effective way to move forward. And we need to go further boldly into regional integration and make sure that it happens for California and the West, and that we continue to be the lead and the ones actually making it happen. Also, let's not forget, congratulations on the whole team and ISO team on the success of integrating renewables. I constantly look at the ISO app, and since we've been talking, it's jumped from 90 to 92% of load being served by renewables right now. So again, lower cost resource on the grid that we're optimizing to deliver even more of those electrons west-wide. So par for the course, and I'm very happy and proud with what the team is doing, and hopefully we can continue on this pathway to success. And having all these resources present, of course, we can't account for all of the extreme and simultaneous occurrences that could happen over the summer, but it's making us more resilient and more reliable overall. So great job, everyone. I mean, we don't take enough time to celebrate the successes, and I think we actually do need to. No time to be modest.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, I think that if you think about just the items that we're highlighting today, to me, it's just something that I think we're all very proud of. It's just the collaboration, the partnerships. You know, we don't do anything alone here. Everything we accomplish is through internal team and just partnership. And we just really value those partnerships, both here in the state and across the Western United States. They've proven very valuable to us. Thank you.
Elliot, I'd just like to ask you a quick question regarding the summer readiness.
Yeah.
And what we anticipate to have early heat this summer in both June and July, and not just for California, but for our Western partners, because we have a nice track record now for the last several years of providing important energy to our Western partners who had much more extreme heat than ourselves. I'm just wondering, do you have a sense of what that's going to look like?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, you know, whether it is the Pacific Northwest or the Desert Southwest or the Intermountain West, you know, everybody is setting themselves up for some heat. We had a good but not fabulous water year up in the Columbia this year, about 91% of average. The Desert Southwest has been in significant drought. And so their hydro conditions are not as strong as they might have otherwise been. And I think as we've seen the last couple of years, you know, we have been able through the EIM to cycle a lot of power. And of course, with our solar production still exceeding our storage capacity, we're able to export a lot of energy. And I think you know, we have just fabulous communication mechanisms set up with the adjacent balancing authorities. And I think, you know, that's what the Western interconnection really should be about. It's about supporting each other, and whether it's, you know, 117 degrees in Sacramento or 125 in Vegas, or, you know, 106 in Portland, or 71 below zero in Montana in the middle of February, these are the conditions that broader interconnectivity can really support. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments? Well, that was a great report. Thank you,
Thank you.
Elliot. So next we're going to move to the WEM governing body chair update. Rob Conzioca is on Zoom with us. There you are. Hi, Rob.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Yeah, Chair Bornstein, Vice Chair Edo, Board of Governors, good morning. And thank you for allowing me a few minutes of your time this morning to share some thoughts from the governing body. This will be my last update to you as chair. My term ends next month. We kind of discussed that yesterday. And instead of giving a look back on what's happened, because I think you've heard yesterday pretty much all the things that have happened, I thought I would provide a few minutes of maybe where we are and a little look forward. These will be my personal perspectives as chair, but I do believe it echoes the sentiment and of the rest of the governing body. And so first off, I'd like to say that priority one, and it's more than just priority, it's all about getting EDAM implemented. Nothing should be distracting staff from being able to make that happen. You know, there was a discussion yesterday on resources, you know, what's the right balance? And I think there is no right balance unless the focus is on implementing EDAM. So I know it's there. You've heard that. And I just want to echo that that has to be the primary focus. Elliot just touched on the congestion revenue allocation issue. You know, we'll have a special session next month as a decisional item. And I think that in one sense that could be looked at as a bit of a distraction. But I'd like to point out and personally state that I think that having this come up and the process that we're seeing is the strength of the stakeholder process within CAISO and within EDAM. I think in another world, in another area, this may not have gotten the attention that it otherwise is getting right now. I think it would have been pretty easy for this topic to be looked at and said, no adjustments are needed right now. We can wait until implementation. We can wait until there is some performance, there's some data, there is some analysis to go with it. And I think the strength is that in this stakeholder process, minority opinions are allowed to be shared and get attention. And so even though it's delayed again, I think that we should take that as or consider it a victory in making certain that when EDAM rolls out, it is right. And everyone feels very strongly that we have moved forward correctly and that it's our best foot forward. So moving on, looking at all of the current set of initiatives that are out there, and the governing body internally ranks them, and we look at them as areas, let's say, as priority, as monitored. Can't have equal weight to everything. I'd like to say that our perspective is, my perspective is, RIF is doing a terrific job of providing input into the process, and they are doing a good job, and they continue to get better at helping to prioritize and emphasize where emphasis needs to be placed. We also believe that staff has done an excellent job in looking at all the available information, taking all of the, I would say, input into account, and really coming up with the right priority schedules of what needs to be done. You know, we have plenty of opportunities to talk to them, to have our input into it. And I think that they really deliver an excellent product. And I'd like to end on the part that is not so visible, and that is things that may be on our radar screen that may not be on others' radar screen. And I'd put these into the horizon and emerging issues. And so the first one is SEAMS issues. You heard somewhat about that yesterday. If you read the RIF report or listened to the RIF meeting, Vice Chair Edo was at the last RIF meeting. You heard a little bit that at the next RIF meeting, SEAMS is going to be addressed. We believe that is going to be a topic that will deserve and need more attention, but just not right now. Concern would be that if there got too much attention right now, it may distract from EDAM being implemented. Focus needs to be on implementation, and then when staff has availability and the time is right, SEAMS will need to be addressed. And then of course, we're going to see a lot of debate on which SEAM issue needs debate and how fast, and which ones needs to be prioritized. And so let's just hold that for later, but that is a emergent issue. And then just more internally, and these are things that we continue to monitor, look at, and evaluate and get educated on. And I'll put these into a single category of we're still looking at the net uncertainty issue. We really want to understand that better. This area is leading the charge, not only in the nation, but probably even worldwide. I think we can all maybe initially agree on that. It is really understanding how we deal with net load uncertainty best. The use of the quantile regression mosaic. You heard comments from us the last 2 years on this issue, and we continue to follow that and make certain we're there. And that all ties into load bias and how all that gets integrated. Those three things really tie together. We don't lose sight of that. We're continuing to get information, improve our education. It just, right now, the other things certainly are higher priority. So with that, that concludes my remarks, and willing to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions from the board?
Can we have a comment?
Very thorough.
Can we have a comment?
Yeah, please.
Okay, Rob, this is just a comment, not a question. I just want to thank you. It's been a privilege to serve with you, and thank you for giving us your thoughts here about how to proceed, even though we have one more meeting.
Yes. Governor Leslie, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. You're not quite done with your job yet. We will see you again in June.
Very
Oh.
good, yes.
Yeah.
Can we also, at this point, give an opportunity, no, we did not ask for public comment on item number 4, so I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
So with that, we will move to item 5, decision on energy management system project funding request. And Khaled is going to introduce this subject. And there he is. Take it
Good
away.
morning. Good morning, Chairman Pristine and ISO Governing Board members. The next slide, please. The energy management system is the mission critical tool that our operators are using in order to manage and operate the grid. It provides them with these. It provides them with the awareness and the monitoring and the control capabilities to be able to deal with the different actual situations that are happening on the grid and allow them to maintain the system balance and the reliability needs of the grid. I am here because like any other technology system, this particular tool, mission critical tool, needs an upgrade. It has been online since 2019 when we started our RC operation, and it has been with us all this time. We've been improving certain aspects of it and fine-tuning it. And now we are getting to a point where it needs to be upgraded in order for us to be proactively maintaining our compliance and be ahead of any closing or avoiding any vulnerabilities related to the old technologies. The upgrade is needed for 2 reasons, and I'm trying actually to summarize here to try to put you back on schedule. So if there is questions, of course, I'll elaborate, but simply put, that the upgrade is needed for 2 reasons. One is the hardware that we are using is now very old, and based on the best practices, it has to be replaced with a more recent and updated and advanced hardware. The other part is some of the third-party products that we have in the system or in the application needs also is getting close to their end of life or end of support, and we need to be ahead of that and update them to continue maintaining our NERC compliance status in the future. In terms, next slide, please. In terms of the schedule, this project is anticipated to last for about 2.5 years. And it's a major upgrade because it involves taking us from the current platform that we are in into a more structured and a more organized way of structuring the code in a way that will allow us to do those future upgrades in an easier manner rather than waiting for so many years and then just do a major big project like this. So this is very important for us. It takes us from a technology point of view, it takes us from where we are into like a better position. In terms of the cost of this upgrade, this is a major project, and it will involve both technology and operation to work in partnership to ensure that, of course, with the vendor help, to ensure that this is success. The total cost is about $19.5 million. That covers both the vendor cost as well as the internal cost that associated with this project. In terms of the funding, the capital reserve will be used. The cash capital reserve that the ISO has managed to accumulate over the so many numbers of years will be used to fund this project, which means that the 2025 budget will not see any impact, or annual revenue requirements will not be impacted for the 2025. So this is going to come from the reserve. The other projects and the funding that we have for those other projects will not be impacted with this. With that, I think that summarizes, the importance of this project and the cost and the schedule. If there is any question, I'll be happy to answer.
I have a couple questions, or one question, I guess, maybe it's a clarification. So the 19.5 million includes internal development costs,
That's right.
and
The vendor.
that's mostly time of work of staff, right?
We have also some contractors, some project management, the consulting.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to understand what share of the 19.5 million is actually incremental to the budget and what share is covered by current employees. Do you have an idea off the top of your head? I don't want to blindside you with this question.
Yeah, I know, we will talk maybe later about the vendor cost itself, which is the biggest probably share of this money. In terms of our employees, of course, we try to cover that with a full-time employee as much as possible. There is about, I would say 40% of the cost is actually coming from full-time employees. Okay. Another almost 40% is from contractors.
Great. That's great to hear. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yes, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay. Then we will move to public comment. And since we have no cards, that means there's nobody in the room who has asked for to make a public comment. So we need to, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of our, Marilyn, thank you. Marilyn, if you would open the lines and see if anyone would like to comment on item number 5.
Absolutely. For our Zoom attendees, to enter the public comment queue, click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When it's your turn to speak, please approve the host request on your screen to be unmuted, then state your full name, affiliation before asking your question. All right. Looks like we have no questions at this time or public comments at this time.
Okay. Then we will move on and I will turn it over to Roger.
Thank you, Chair Borenstein. We have a motion. Let's move that the ISO Board of Governors approves the capital project budget of $19.5 million for the energy management system upgrade project as described in the memorandum dated May 14, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We heard you right. Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Khaled. And thank you for all of the negotiating. The next item is item 6, decision on subscriber participating transmission owner market scheduling options. And Neil, you are going to introduce?
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair Borenstein. So first off, I will be asking Riddy Ray to present the decision item today, presenting a second scheduling option for subscribers using subscriber participating transmission owner facilities. I did want to mention that since Riddy last presented to the board, I'm pleased to tell you he's been since promoted to Manager of Regulatory Contracts. In that capacity, he replaced Chris Sibley, who retired after being with the ISO for 27 years. So in that, we also wish Chris the best in his retirement. Now, as Riddy will explain, the option that he's presenting today has been developed to provide additional flexibility to subscribers to address limitations that could have otherwise created inefficiencies both now and into the future. I should also mention that in addition to that decision item, that in the course of the stakeholder consultation, several stakeholders did raise issues that related to a related collateral issue that had been accepted and approved by FERC in the past. But notwithstanding that, the ISO team and SunZia worked collaboratively to develop a path forward that Riddy will also address as part of his presentation. So with that, I will turn to Riddy to walk you through the decision item. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the board. Today, I'll be presenting a recommendation for a decision on the subscriber participating transmission owner market scheduling options policy initiative. Next slide, please. The subscriber participating transmission owner model is a new model that was approved through a ISO stakeholder process in 2023, filed at FERC and approved by FERC on March 12th, 2024. The transmission allowed through this model is funded by entities which we refer to as subscribers. And in return for funding these transmission facilities, the subscribers get access to existing contract rights on these transmission facilities. During the implementation of these rights, we discovered certain implementation issues which raised some operational challenges and limited access to market functions for those using these existing contract rights. In order to address these limitations and find alternatives to mitigate them, we conducted a stakeholder process to evaluate the alternative scheduling options, which we are presenting today. Next slide, please. Under the existing contract rights model, when subscribers have to use this for participating in the market, they are required to self-schedule using balanced source and sink, which allows them to receive a congestion hedge as well as a scheduling priority on the path. The subscribers will only receive these existing contract rights, which includes the scheduling priority and the congestion hedge, only on the subscriber participating transmission owner transmission path. That treatment does not extend to the rest of the ISO system. In order to use our existing market functionality to manage these different priorities given to these subscribers, the market participants utilizing these existing contract rights need to schedule export-import bid pairs at the end of the subscriber PTO transmission path. We have a visual down here which demonstrates how this transaction would take place using the example of SunZia transmission system, which is the first transmission owner that'll be implemented using this model. So using these transmission rights over the path from Penal Central to Palo Verde requires these subscribers to export out at Palo Verde and then import back in order to serve ISO demand. So essentially you have ISO connected generation exporting out of the ISO BA and re-importing back just to serve internal BA demand. One of the limitations, one of the challenges with the usage of these existing contract rights is it limited how these subscribers could participate within EDAM, because EDAM does not allow the use of export-import pairs at internal tie points or at transfer points, which is a functionality of the EDAM model. Next slide, please. As part of the stakeholder initiative, what we came up with is the alternate scheduling option, which would essentially allow the subscribers to exchange their existing contract rights for the usage of congestion revenue rights. It is a mechanism that's already existing. It is in usage by other transmission owners. We are simply extending it for usage by the subscribers under the subscriber transmission owner model. What this option would now allow is for subscribers to no longer be just limited to self-scheduling. They can economically bid. This allows for more effective integration into EDAM. In return for these benefits, the subscribers do forego the highest level of scheduling priority and the perfect congestion hedge they would have on the path of these subscriber rights. But in return, they do receive financial entitlement rights in the form of congestion revenue rights, irrespective of whether they self-schedule or economically bid in. These congestion revenue rights, which will be granted to them as a result of this conversion, will still be limited to the subscriber PTO path. It does not extend beyond that in order to mirror the existing contract rights which they previously had. We went through an extensive stakeholder process to evaluate the different options, including the congestion revenue right option. In the end, stakeholders generally supported this enhancement, given it allowed more scheduling flexibility and reduced some of the operational challenges in the market. There were some concerns raised. One of the stakeholders questioned the need to provide the non-subscriber usage payments to subscribers, even though they were receiving congestion rents. The non-subscriber usage payment, which is a mechanism of the original subscriber PTO model, essentially requires payments to the subscriber participating transmission owner and the subscribers themselves if these transmission facilities are essentially used by entities we refer to as non-subscribers, that are entities that did not originally fund the line. In order to address some of these concerns, the ISO agreed to, in the proposal, to not calculate, to not charge or pay any non-subscriber usage charges to the subscriber PTO for associated imports on the subscriber PTO path. The non-subscriber usage charge is calculated for both exports and imports, but in this policy initiative, we are essentially suspending any charges and payments associated with just the import component of the non-subscriber usage payment. It is being, the period is for 2 years, during which we will monitor the extent to which we see imports on the line. We will provide reports to our stakeholders, and then we will make a determination in collaboration with our stakeholders if we need to revisit the design of this model and resolve any issues. Next slide, please. We recommend that the ISO Board of Governors approve this model, which will allow us to continue using this transmission ownership model to increase connectivity across the West. Just to summarize, the congestion revenue rights enhancement, which we are now proposing, will allow economic bidding in the market. It addresses the implementation issues of the subscriber PTO model within EDAM, and it also has a overall support for the enhancement. Just to reiterate, by pausing the calculation and the payout of the import usage associated, the import-related non-subscriber usage charges, it will allow us some time to determine what really the level of imports are and what the impact would have been on the non-subscriber usage payments that are made to the subscriber PTOs. Thank you.
Thank you, Riddhi. Sounds like we had one public comment letter that Roger wanted to mention.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Borenstein. I did want to mention that we received a public comment letter that has been provided to the board by Pattern Energy, and that has been included in the record.
Thank you, Roger. Any comments? Any comments? Mary?
I just have a question about the letter, actually, because in the letter, in the second to last paragraph, there's a reference to the fact that the NSUR payment could be lower, that FERC could result in a lower NSUR for exports out of CAISO. Could you just explain that?
Yes, so the non-subscriber usage charge that we included in the policy model requires a non-subscriber usage rate, which is $1 per megawatt hour rate that is filed by the transmission owner at FERC. Sincere Transmission LLC, owned by Pattern, is going through that FERC process to determine that rate. I believe right now where they are at with FERC is they are looking to refile to reduce that rate. So that does happen, that would essentially reduce the amount of NSUR or non-subscriber usage rate that gets charged to exports on this line. So it is a result of FERC action on the rates filed by the transmission owner.
And I will just, since it's on the same subject, ask for clarification. The export charge is not being suspended for 2 years.
That is correct.
The import charge is being suspended.
That is correct.
And is the anticipation that exports will be a fairly small effect? I mean, the line was built primarily for imports, is my impression. Is that right?
The basis for the basis for allowing the export charges to move forward is any non-subscriber usage charges related to exports that are paid to the subscriber PTOs are essentially self-funding. Exports will pay the wheeling access charge, which is then used to pay the subscriber PTO. Unlike the imports, which would result in an impact on the transmission access charge, we didn't see that issue with
Got it.
exports. So
Yeah, okay.
So it wasn't necessarily with the level, it was more about the overall impact on the rates.
Okay. We
My
got
comment
many.
was just continuing on what you had just said, is if we can make sure that you keep the board updated on the import charges, even though we're calculating them, but we're not charging for them, it would be interesting to know if and what the impact on the TAC would be. I mean, I'm hugely supportive of the SPTO model. I think it's great. And then the non-users surcharge, that's okay as well. I'll just like to be informed on the updates. Thank you.
Yes,
Great.
definitely.
Dan,
Oh,
you want to
thank
go next?
Yeah, I just had a quick question because I thought I understood this and then maybe I don't. So the surcharge is actually in effect. It will, after 2 years, automatically resume unless we do something to stop it? Or does the 2-year window, we need to make a new filing, do something different? I read that we're going to have a stakeholder process to go through the data that we're going to be gathering over the 2 years. I just wasn't clear if the surcharge is in effect, and we're taking a 2-year pause on it. But if we don't do anything, there's no further filings, it would automatically go back into effect in 2 years?
That is correct. It will automatically go into effect, and that's how we are designing it.
Okay. We're
The,
making a commitment, we're going to go through a process and based on the data that we're collecting over the 2 years, so it'll be transparent to people what's going on.
the commitment is to evaluate the data, present it to stakeholders, and make a determination if we actually need to revisit the design.
Okay, thank you.
And it's Neil here. I would just clarify that that approach seemed to be the right way to move forward, given that FERC had approved and has approved this structure. So the pause is a good step to give stakeholders the time they need. But like you said, the structure that's in place has actually been approved by FERC. Yeah.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. I have one more question, just because I think we have time and I'm still trying to understand this. The statement that this requires subscribers to forego scheduling priority, got that, and perfect congestion hedge. Isn't bidding zero a perfect congestion hedge in the same way as having scheduling priority?
So
I understand it's
yeah.
not a physical, but financially, isn't it equivalent?
So the scheduling priority the subscribers were originally getting through the usage of our existing contract rights was just baked into the rights. They just got the highest priority based on self-scheduling, but the congestion hedge they received, and which is why we said it's the perfect congestion hedge, it is congestion hedge across day ahead and real-time markets. They will be giving that up to just get congestion hedge in the day ahead market. So that's just the distinction we were trying to draw.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes sense. Whoop. Okay. So that is all the questions from the board, I believe. So we will move to the Department of Market Monitoring is going to weigh in. And I don't see Adam in the room, I don't think. Yeah, there he is. He's up on the screen. Adam, welcome.
All right. Hi, good morning. Morning, Chair Bornstein, Vice Chair Edo, and governors. Thank you for the opportunity today to provide DMM's comments on management's proposal to establish the economic scheduling option for the subscriber participating transmission owner model. DMM supports the economic scheduling option as proposed by management. We believe the proposed approach will address the issues management has identified with applying the existing transmission contract functionality in this context, while also allowing additional economic competition with imports using subscriber transmission. DMM agrees that it may be difficult to estimate the volume of non-subscriber use before any subscriber PTO projects are operational, And we believe it would be important to closely monitor the volume of non-subscriber use and any related market impacts. And therefore, DMM also supports management's proposed 2-year period to monitor non-subscriber use, during which non-subscriber usage charges for imports will be calculated, but not paid to the subscriber PTO. DMM understands that some stakeholders are concerned with how the non-subscriber usage rate cost associated with the subscriber PTO model will affect California ratepayers and whether any type of gaming opportunities exist. DMM acknowledges these concerns, and as previously noted, we support the ISO's proposal to monitor non-subscriber usage on the SunZia transmission line after it's operational and determine if any new policy initiative to re-examine the non-subscriber usage rate may be necessary in the future. We further note that DMM also intends to monitor closely for any potential gaming or unintended market impacts of the proposed economic scheduling option. So with that, thank you very much. This concludes my comment, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Adam. So we now move to public comment on this item. We have no cards from people in the room. So Marilyn, if you would open the lines and see if there is comment from virtual participants.
Absolutely. Click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen to enter the public comment queue. When it's your turn to speak, please approve the host request on your screen to be unmuted, then state your full name, affiliation, and question. And those of you dialed in on the phone only line, dialing #2 will place you in the queue. Okay, looks like we do have one public comment.
Okay, let's hear from that person.
Quick mic check. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. This is Scott Ranzel with Pacific Gas and Electric Company, Board of Governors. I wanted to thank you and appreciate the time today as well as the discussion. I also want to reach out and appreciate the ISO. They worked extensively to help work through some of the stakeholder concerns that exist with the SPTO model. And I believe as of today, we have really achieved a workable solution. The introduction of economic bidding is a positive that I think will reflect well on the participation and activity for this model. It being a new model, the new subscriber transmission rate, as you've already heard, has been a concern for people. And calculation and activity recording without an impact to California ratepayers at this point in time for the next 2 years is definitely a positive that we look forward to moving forward on to ensure that the line is used as recommended. It is fully accessible to people and available and delivers to California some necessary renewable energy that I think is important. We just want to make sure that we're protecting California ratepayers in that process. So I appreciate everybody's involvement and CAISO's continued effort to work through a design solution that meets a lot of our criteria. So thank you for the opportunity to speak and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions? Actually, I had one other question for Riddy before we move on that is about the congestion revenue rights. So on slide 4, it says congestion revenue rights would be available solely to the subscriber of the SPTO. Does that mean that a line that is not 100% subscribed does not create congestion revenue rights up to capacity? Is that how it works?
That is correct. The congestion revenue rights that would be created in this conversion process is limited up to the subscriber rights. So anything, if it's less than 100%, we would only create the CRRs to allocate to the subscribers up to that level. They do not get subscriber rights above that or congestion revenue.
And there is no process through our normal CRR auction for those additional rights to be created or auctioned.
We did not impose any additional limitations on that transmission capacity of whether it could create additional rights to our existing process or not. So we did not say that it would not create more rights. We just limited, our approach was just to limit the access of congestion revenue rights to the subscribers just to the level of ETCs they have.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand when a congestion revenue rights auction comes around and a third party expresses interest in CRRs on this line, how will the CAISO respond to that? They'll say, assuming that it is sort of in the gap between the percentage subscribed and the capacity.
I'm fairly certain we would allow it, but I would need to confirm that. So I don't want to give a,
Okay.
yeah, I don't want to say with certainty
That
that we'd
seems
absolutely.
like it's quite possible that
Right.
we will face that situation, so. And then the other thing, when you say would be available solely to the subscriber, these are tradable rights.
That's
So
correct.
they would be allocated solely to
Correct.
the subscriber, but
Correct.
they would be available to anybody who wants to buy them.
Yes, we did allow trading on the secondary
Yeah.
CRR system, right?
Yeah, okay. Any other comments, questions?
Just to clarify, is that up to 3.5 gigawatts, which is,
The transmission has two legs. The HVDC transmission, which connects the wind to the SRP BA, is 3,000 megawatts. And then the transmission rights we have from Penal Central to ISO border is 2,131 megawatts. So the CRRs are only limited up to those megawatts. It's not based on the megawatts of wind that are connected. It's on the transmission capacity.
Okay.
We ready for a motion?
I think we are.
We already did public comment. We already did public comment. Move that the ISO Board of Governors approves the proposed subscriber participating transmission owner market scheduling options as described in the memorandum dated May 14, 2025. And move that the ISO Board of Governors authorizes management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the proposal, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy, but contain discrete revisions to incorporate commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. Have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
That was Joe. Thank you, Joe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Governors. The
Thank
motion
you.
passes.
Okay, board, so we have a decision point. We're going to take a break at some point between now and the end of the general session. We could do the transmission plan, or we could take a 10-minute break now. Any preference? Okay, we will take a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 10:42.
On the dot.
Make sure all mics are off. Yes.
Been nice. We did have. That was good.
was nice. Yeah, right. Well, that's part of what makes. I would say. No, I know what you mean. I used to say that it's a commission. It's just say commission. Everything's fine. This guy, Huntington said, imagine they're screaming. They're not gonna scream, but imagine they're screaming. Yeah. Right, yes, yes. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Actually, meeting it. Yeah. But, so it was,
One minute warning. 1 minute warning.
if we're ready.
Okay, and we're back. We're on item 7. The decision on the 2024-2025 transmission plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Neil Miller to introduce this.
Good morning and thank you. Yes, I will be asking Jeff Billington, our Director of Transmission Infrastructure Planning, to present the 24-25 transmission plan for your approval today. Before turning the microphone over to Jeff, I did want to make a few comments. First, I want to thank Jeff and his team for the outstanding effort that went into the development of the transmission plan. I also want to thank the Public Utilities Commission, the Energy Commission, our transmission owners, and our stakeholders for the effort that they applied in getting us to this point today, and for helping to address the state's energy goals reliably and in a way that achieves the most cost-effective and efficient means possible. This year's plan continues to synchronize power and transmission planning, interconnection queuing, and the resource procurement, developed in close collaboration with inputs from the state agencies and the other local regulatory authorities. I also wanted to highlight a bit of a significant transition in this year's transmission plan that Jeff will explain in more detail. This year's plan continues to reflect the continuation of the pace of resource development from prior year's plans. And because it's reflecting that continuation, there's a bit of a softening in the need for policy-driven transmission compared to the last few plans. However, it does reflect a materially higher level of rate of load growth that was reflected in last year's energy forecast. And that does result in a significantly higher pace of development needed for reliability transmission to serve load. Now, I do also note that we have received a number of letters concerning the transmission plan, largely supportive, but also identifying a few specific concerns. So after Jeff has presented the transmission plan itself, I would like to spend a minute touching on the concerns expressed in those letters to let you know how we're addressing them. And then we can move on, of course, into the public comment, but we think that would help to identify how we're addressing those concerns at that point. So with that, I will
Neil,
turn it over to
Neil, I'm
Jeff.
sorry to interrupt you. That's a perfect segue for me. Let me note for the record
Oh.
what those letters are.
Of course.
And yeah, we had received 4 public comment letters, one from San Francisco Water, Power, Sewer, one from City of Palo Alto Utilities, one from Silicon Valley Power, and one from Alameda Municipal Power. And as you allude to, each of those have been provided to the board and are in the record.
Thank you very much. So with that, I will then turn it over to Jeff to present the plan.
Good morning, Chair Bornstein and members of the board. As Neil indicated, I'll be presenting the decision item on the ISO's 2024-2025 transmission plan. Next slide. And with this, the annual transmission is presented today for approval. The primary drivers of the capital costs in this year's plan include the resources in the California Public Utilities Commission's base portfolio to meet this policy goals and the increases in the pace of load growth. And this is in particular in the Greater Bay Area. The ISO is always focused on the costs and recommendations being on long-term effectiveness and efficiency of solutions. In this year's transmission plan, in response to state legislative requests, the ISO has also for the first time extended the annual planning process to a 15-year planning horizon window. Next slide, please. And this goes back to with Neil's comment in terms of the strategic direction for transformational change. That was established in the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the California Public Utilities Commission, the California Energy Commission, and the CAISO in December of 2022. And that in large in terms of tightens that linkage between the resource planning, the transmission planning, procurement directions, and the ISO's interconnection process. And it's created kind of that linkage with the the California Energy Commission's SB 100 and IPER work activities, and the California Public Utilities Commission's processes, and the ISO's internal processes. And it does utilize and reaffirms the existing state agencies' use of a single forecast set in resource and transmission planning. Next slide, please. So as we look, the climate change goals continue to drive the load forecasts that we see in this graph. The CEC's load forecast are utilized by both the California Public Utilities Commission in the integrated resource planning and the ISO's transmission planning process. As I indicated, as a single forecast set with the applicable weather event forecasts used for the specific studies as indicated. The ISO has utilized the 2023 IPER forecast, and that's the top red line in the graph there that extends out to 15 years. And so that's what the forecast that is being used in the 2024-2025 transmission planning process. Next slide, please. The climate change goals and load forecasts continue to drive the resource requirements. The base portfolio of this year's planning cycle has about 76 gigawatts identified by 2039. The resource portfolios are relatively consistent with the previous planning and maintains the trajectory to meet the state goals. Next slide, please. The 24-25 transmission plan continues to utilize the zonal approach. to plan the transmission for the resources identified in the portfolios, to enable clear direction and prioritization in the resource interconnection and procurement processes. This diagram identifies the interconnection zones with the capacity of resources in the portfolios for each of the zones that the ISO is planning the transmission system to reliably interconnect the resources and be deliverable to the loads in the ISO's grid. Next slide, please. The analysis of the transmission planning process is conducted in a sequential manner, starting with the reliability assessment, identifying reliability-driven need projects. Then the policy assessment is conducted to identify any policy-driven projects needed to taking into account consideration of the reliability needs in the reliability assessment. And then the economic assessment is undertaken to identify any market efficiency needs, again, taking into consideration the policy and reliability needs in a multi-value approach. In addition, we undertake every 2 years a long-term local capacity technical studies, and this was undertaken in this planning cycle. The interregional transmission process is a 2-year process coordinated with the other planning regions, that being Northern Grid and WestConnect, for consideration of any interregional transmission proposals as potential solutions for regional needs. We are in year 1 of the process in this cycle, and there were no projects identified to be brought forward into next year's planning cycle to be assessed. Next slide. The reliability assessment identified 28 reliability projects driven by load growth, as I indicated, particularly in the Greater Bay Area, and the evolving grid conditions as the generation fleet transitions to the increased renewable generation. The estimated cost of the 28 reliability-driven projects is $4.6 billion. 7 of the reliability-driven projects were approved by ISO management within the transmission planning process. 21 additional reliability projects are recommended in the revised draft of the transmission plan. These projects are driven by the load growth and the evolving grid conditions. Two of the projects, and those are highlighted in red, are eligible for competitive solicitation, that being the Greater Bay Area 500 kV transmission reinforcement project and the San Jose B NRS 230 kV line project. Next slide, please. There is one previously approved transmission project that was on hold from the previous planning cycle, the Moraga Sobrante 115 kV line reconductoring project, and it is recommended for that project to remain on hold. And in addition, there is one previously approved transmission project, the Ravenswood 230 115 kV transmission limiting facility upgrade project, that is recommended to be canceled. Next slide. To meet the renewable generation requirements established in the CPUC developed renewable generation portfolios, an additional 3 transmission projects that are policy driven are recommended for approval, and those total approximately $289 million. Next slide, please. Economic study investigating market efficiency opportunities to reduce the total costs to ratepayers through transmission upgrades not otherwise identified by or for reliability, accessing renewables, and serving load were conducted in this year's annual transmission planning projects. There were no projects driven solely by the market efficiency conditions or considerations that are being recommended in this plan. And this kind of touches kind of on like Elliot in his CEO report. The plan and the ISO, we continue to pay significant attention to the use of grid enhancing technologies that can encompass a range of technologies, with specific benefits and opportunities. And these include advanced conductors, power flow controllers, dynamic line rating, or topology optimization. The use of grid enhancing technologies in this planning cycle consists of the use of advanced conductors in 5 applications of the recommended projects. The transmission plan also, as Elliot indicates, summarizes the use of grid enhancing technologies in past years' transmission plans. And the ISO will be submitting a report on the use of grid enhancing technologies in this cycle to the state legislature pursuant to Assembly Bill 2779 after the transmission plan has been approved. Next slide. Oh, and as I indicated, the interregional transmission process is a 2-year process coordinated with Northern Grid and WestConnect for consideration of interregional projects. The 2024 is in year 1 of the 2-year process, and there were 5 potential projects that were submitted into the ISO's 2024 interregional project submission window in the first quarter of 2024. The ISO considered all interregional transmission projects proposals in the 2024-2025 planning process and did not identify any ISO regional need for the proposed interregional transmission projects. Next slide. The ISO received comments throughout the entire stakeholder process on the draft transmission plan. There was general support for reliability policy and economic assessments that was conducted and the recommendations within this year's transmission plan. There was a concern with assessment of alternatives that were submitted into the request window as part of the annual process. In particular, the concerns were that the ISO was not recommending certain proposals for approval. And with this, the ISO, in particular with one project, the ISO will continue to explore the Warnerville-Newark Transmission Expansion Project submitted by Hetchy Water and Power as a possible extension of the 24-25 transmission planning cycle. There were also some concerns with regards to the transparency of transmission plan deliverability reservation for long lead time resources that the ISO has updated in the revised draft transmission plan to address some of those concerns that were identified. And there was also concerns with regards to the transparency in our assessment of the grid enhancement technologies. And as we've indicated, the ISO has assessed grid enhancement technologies in the past and in this year's planning cycle, and will continue to assess those and engage stakeholders in our assessment of the alternatives and mitigation and where we're using the grid enhancement as we continue future planning cycles. Next slide. And so within this, in summary, a total of 31 projects were identified, totaling $4.8 billion that were found to be needed in this planning cycle. 2 of the projects, the Greater Bay Area 500 kV Transmission Reinforcement Project and the San Jose B NRS 230 kV line project, are eligible for competitive procurement. And if we go to the next slide, it's my last slide. The ISO is recommending the 2024-2025 transmission plan for approval. The plan continues to utilize the zonal approach and resource development as a foundation for interconnection process prioritization and focus on procurement activities. It also continues to pursue low emission strategies in addressing reliability needs on the ISO controlled grid. And it sets a foundation for achieving higher renewable energy goals and providing prudent and economic development of the transmission system. And so with this, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. Neil, do you want to
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
Augment.
Jeff. Yes, so I'll just step through the 4 letters and just comment briefly on how we believe we've addressed the concerns to this point. Oh, sure. Sorry about that. So right off the top, let me start with the Silicon Valley Power letter. The gist of the letter is that Silicon Valley Power did request that we review and consider approving an additional 115 kV line reconductoring project as part of the larger South Bay reinforcement project. Jeff and the team have reviewed the situation, and the revised draft that was posted now does include that additional enhancement. So we believe that concern has been addressed. The city of Palo Alto also submitted a letter requesting, they agreed with the projects that were set out in the transmission plan. Their concern is that the current schedule for PG&E to implement a project of their particular concern is scheduled to take place after a maintenance upgrade, a maintenance project is completed, and they are looking for us to try to accelerate the schedule for the project that's identified in the transmission plan. This will require coordination with PG&E, so we cannot unilaterally commit to that, but we are committing to working with PG&E to see if that schedule can be advanced. With the City and County of San Francisco, we do have a letter from them looking for us to extend our consideration of the Warnerville Newark project that Jeff mentioned. And as Jeff mentioned in his presentation today, we are looking at continuing the discussions past the approval today, hopefully approval today of the transmission plan, and continue the discussion regarding other benefits that that line may bring to bear. So we will continue with those discussions as a possible extension of this year's transmission plan. And the last letter was from the Alameda Power and Telecom on behalf of the City of Alameda. The concern that they expressed in the letter was that they have had to live under a load transfer scheme and the risk of a remedial action scheme operation for some time. They, as we, have also been a bit frustrated at the pace of the development of a battery storage project in the area that was to help mitigate the impact to them. What they're looking for, and just paraphrasing, was they're looking for confirmation that the long-term plan that Jeff set out today is intended to also do away with the need from a planning perspective to rely on the load transfer scheme and the remedial action scheme as a long-term means of operation. And to confirm that is the intention. The long-term plan is meant to address those concerns. So with that, I just wanted to get those comments out in front about the letters themselves and be looking forward to any questions or comments.
Great. Questions? Mary?
I'm just wondering, in the San Francisco case, unlike the Silicon Valley case, how long do you think it'll take to give them a decision?
I don't have a good estimate. We do need to sit down, and Barbara Hale's here today to provide some comments. We do need to sit down with the staff and work through the additional benefits that they see the line providing. But, you know, to be clear, our own analysis based on our parameters and what we had available did not have a supportive case for approving the project. But we are wanting to sit down to explore the additional benefits that could be attributed to the project. But I don't know what that's going to take.
Any other board?
I have a couple of questions. They're not specifically about this plan, but about kind of the trends that I see in the plan. I'm hoping you can speak to them as to provide context. You know, I'm somewhat relieved that the price of this plan is a little bit lower, but I see the demand growth and the continuing need for these reliability-driven projects. And I expect that at some point we'll have to bring back more public policy projects. What is your sense of the prognosis? Are we, you know, we gotten over the hump with these last 2 years and now this is more what the new normal is going forward?
Well,
or?
I think there are two things at play. First, on the policy-driven transmission that is largely focused on accessing additional generation, we do see that the pace of development is now pretty solid. So now we're looking at what new requirements, well, we have 1 or 2 projects that needed additional work from past cycles, but setting those aside, then we're looking at what is coming up beyond that current 10 to 15-year planning horizon as new requirements come on at the far end. That's quite a bit different than the transition we went through the last 3 or 4 years, where we had accelerated from long-term projections adding only 1,000 a year to 2,700 a year to 4,000 a year, and then reached the current trajectory of 5 to 7,000 a year. But now that we're on that trajectory, it's about taking care of what shows up at the end, as opposed to constantly revisiting a changing pace. Now, on the load growth side and reliability requirements, the forecast that has already been provided to us for the 25-26 transmission plan is showing, again, a higher rate of growth than the forecast that was even used in this. So we do see reliability requirements continuing to grow to serve load. The trade-off is that is also serving new load that is also paying rates. So it's not all just about serving existing load, but it is accompanied by load growth as well. But we do see that triggering additional reliability requirements to serve those loads as we move forward. So next year's plan, I also expect to see a fairly heavy emphasis on load growth related reliability projects as we transition again to a higher long-term expectation of a rate of growth. Hopefully that settles out the same way our policy-driven transmission settles out once you've established that long-term trajectory. That's also, though, I just want to put a plug in, that's also where the benefit of our 20-year outlook helps, because it does help provide and set the stage for the longer-term context, so that when we are bringing projects to you, it is a fair question today to say, well, you already know you're going to be looking at a higher rate of growth. How comfortable are you that these are the right projects? And what gives us the comfort is the sequencing. We look at these being the right first steps, but recognizing there will be additional transmission on top of what we're asking for approval today, not instead of. And that's an important distinction.
That's great, Neil. That's very helpful and very reassuring. I have one more kind of forward-looking question. I see 5 of these advanced conductors being proposed this time around. Is that a trend that you expect will continue, that we'll see more of that, or are these very specific instances where they make the most sense?
So we do expect to see more use of advanced conductors. The initial use was and had to be a bit slower to adopt because there are entry barriers to picking up a new type of conductor. Even with a conventional conductor, moving to a new family involved new tools and so forth. The advanced conductors go beyond that, requiring new installation practices, training, tools. They are a different animal. They do require a lot of additional detail to manage. So once the utilities got past that entry barrier, that created the opportunity for more use of advanced conductors going forward. We do always have to remind people that especially the trapezoidal wound conductors, they do provide more aluminum for a given diameter, more conductor surface. So at the same level of usage, they are more efficient than a conventional conductor. But when you really push them to their maximum capability, they do become quite a bit lossier because you are pushing a lot of current through that aluminum conductor. So they're an excellent tool in the toolbox. They don't solve all your problems. So you need to do a careful review of the benefits in each application, but we definitely see more use going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Neil. That's really, really helpful.
Thanks.
Can I ask? Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I'm sorry. Neil, this is not necessarily our purview, but I'd still like to know your opinion. In order to get to our 2045 goals, right, the zero carbon goals, which is on the policy side, do you think there's a way in our relations with CPUC and the CEC that we can show stakeholders in California and the West what our path is to the gas reduction? Because this comes up, and I know as a CAISO board member, it's odd because it's really not our job per se, but it is our job overall in terms of coordination, right? And I think as we get closer, having a demonstrable path to what that looks like will be important.
Well, that is an important consideration. As you mentioned, the state agencies, the Energy Commission with the Long-Term Integrated Energy Policy Report, and the Public Utilities Commission with their integrated resource planning really are on the front line for the overall resource planning, including to achieve those goals. And there are expectations set out for some of their goals more specifically in legislation. So we play a supporting role in that regard, helping with the transmission information and also needing to make sure that our local capacity studies are conducted in a way that also demonstrate that the transmission system is not a barrier to gas-fired retirement that could otherwise take place. Now, from a system-wide resource perspective, I have to admit we are going into a period of greater uncertainty as our load growth is continuing to accelerate. And not only the peak loads growing, but our load factor and our winter peak loads are growing, which is also a success of the electrification, building electrification, transportation electrification. And those are creating some additional challenges that the state agencies will have to take into account. They have given us in the past studies with sensitivity studies looking at higher rates of gas-fired generation retirement so that they're properly informed. But we do see that the world's changing quite quickly here, especially with the influx of data center loads as well. So these decisions are going to have to be made carefully. And in some of the CPUC's longer term work, they had also identified the need for other firm, dispatchable, clean resource, and without identifying the particular type. So there will need to be some very careful discussions taking place through the state agency processes on how to achieve those state goals reliably and also reduce the reliance on gas-fired generation.
I have a couple of questions, Neil. First, on the advanced conductors, who makes the decision? So the way this works is the PTO proposes, or someone proposes the line, and they propose the exact technology at the same time. Is that right?
Well,
and then we approve?
It sort of depends on the application. I'll just jump back to mentioning some of the original adoption of advanced conductors by the utilities was actually to address other problems. Besides being able to carry more current, they can also be strung at a considerably higher tension and basically a flatter physical profile. So these conductors originally were also being used to address some maintenance issues and some clearance issues. So the utilities at times are proposing advanced conductors through their own maintenance and capital replacement programs. When these are being proposed or considered through our transmission planning process, there the suggestion to use an advanced conductor in a particular application can come from anyone. There is no single track. A transmission owner might propose a solution that's relying on advanced conductors. Jeff and his team might be looking at a situation and saying, here's an opportunity, or a stakeholder comment going through our consultative process could identify the potential. Then, and in those cases, then Jeff and his team do the cost-benefit analysis and consider the options and recommend what they believe the best solution.
And that cost-benefit analysis includes things like the relative line losses.
Yeah, line losses are part of consideration. And we go to the level of analysis necessary to support the decision.
And then my other question is a very high-level question. In the last few months, we've seen big changes in energy policy, which I could see affecting building electrification, offshore wind, and a number of other factors that play into the transmission plan. Are those how do we handle the uncertainty around these? It seems like an economist, I would think more optionality is important because we don't know what things are going to look like 4 years from now. But on the other hand, I could see the argument that their state policy and we are following the state policy.
Well, on one hand, as you mentioned, there is the tension there that on one hand, we cannot afford to have the transmission system become the barrier to achieving state policy. So we need to move forward and take action and move forward prudently. We also need to consider the risks and what our options are if the circumstances change. One example I will give was that the case of the North Coast offshore wind transmission, the transmission to the Humboldt area that we just awarded competitively. Those projects were designed and tailored to be the right first step, but also recognizing the resource requirement could grow beyond that. So circuits built initially at 500 kV AC, but one could be converted to DC operation. So we have that scalability to handle if it goes one way. On the other hand, we were very clear in bidding those projects that there's inherent uncertainty in those resource types, and that as a result, those projects had a higher risk of potential cancellation than what our normal situation is. And because of that, we were expecting prudent cost management strategies to be built into the award. And then the overall strategy is also through the longer term planning, like the outlook, so that we're considering, in any transmission project, it's not a one and done. Is this the right first step, recognizing you might have additional requirements and need to layer additional transmission on top of it? Or load growth could flatten out for whatever reason, and that needs to be an operable solution for many years. So considering those options is an important part of every planning decision. But sooner or later, we have to make a decision and move on.
Thank you, Neil. Maybe there's a quick answer that you, so CAISO approves a line. Build out starts on it. There's a massive change in the need for it, and particularly decline. CAISO reevaluates and says, turns out we don't need this line at all. Millions of dollars have been spent. Who pays for those millions of dollars at that point? And what's our liability or responsibility? Or
the abandoned plant costs are recoverable through the transmission access charge. It doesn't happen very often, but it can. And just as I was mentioning with the two projects to Humboldt, that's why we're being very careful about what the pace of abandoned plant costs look like, recognizing that that is a ratepayer expense ultimately if those projects are canceled. We have to be that's one of the reasons we have to be very careful. The projects we're building, as well as any risk we're taking, is recovered through our transmission access charge.
Great. Thank you very much.
And why would the projects be canceled? Is it just because of policy changes? I thought they also made economic sense, and this was something that is in line with our policy objectives and goals for carbon neutrality long term.
Well, that was and we prepare for a lot of things we hope never to see happen.
Okay, so it's still on track. We're still moving forward. This is still a good plan.
Yes.
Good.
Okay. Questions? We will move. Okay, so if there are no more questions, we will move to public comment. We have one public comment from in the room. Barbara Hale is here to join us. And Barbara, would you like to make your comments? Meanwhile, Marilyn, we will then move to, actually, maybe I should, Marilyn, if you could queue up any comments online.
Absolutely. As a reminder to everyone to enter the public comment queue, please click the raise hand icon on the bottom center of your Zoom screen. When it's your turn to speak, please approve the host's request on your screen to be unmuted, then state your full name, affiliation, and question. And
Thank you. Oh. Barbara.
Thank you.
Nice to
Thank
see
you. Good morning, members of the board and staff. I'm Barbara Hale. I'm the Assistant General Manager for Power at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. We are a department of the City and County of San Francisco. We operate water, sewer, and power. On the power side, 2 retail electric service programs, our Clean Power SF program under the California Community Choice Aggregation Governance Structure, and our Hetch Hetchy Power Program, publicly owned utility. And it's in that capacity that I appear before you today, supporting our Warnerville Transmission Expansion Project and the comments and recommendations of your staff. We operate 385 megawatts of generation, over 160 miles of transmission. That transmission, since we've been in operation for over 100 years, we have aging infrastructure. We are looking at making decisions regarding this asset, these transmission assets, given their age. We've been evaluating participating transmission owner status with your staff for years, and as recently as just this past couple months, and really see further engagement and support of our expansion project, increasing the likelihood of San Francisco becoming a PTO. The potentiality is increased if the conversations we envision come to fruition. So we're really here presenting the CAISO with what we regard as a generational opportunity to shape and integrate our transmission expansion project into the state's long-term objectives. The project just makes sense as a business, financial, technical, and ultimately in combination as a policy matter, because we're really aligned with the CAISO. It being a public project means that we're an ideal partner invested in committing to provide long-term affordable power to the community, containing costs, utilizing our attractive public financing. It's buildable because it's using an existing transmission right-of-way. We'll have significantly fewer permitting, right-of-way acquisition, siting challenges that come with greenfield projects, which can really challenge cost containment and timing. And it's contributing to reliability. As a technical matter, it's complementary to the projects that are being proposed, recommended by CAISO staff, including the Manning Metcalf 500 kV project. We see it as really mitigating reliability issues that aren't addressed by the Manning Metcalf project alone. Both of these projects are needed in the long term to mitigate reliability concerns. We also see it as reducing long-term risks for the CAISO and the state while delivering all of these benefits. That's because we think we can get this project operational in the 7 or so year window as a hedge against delays associated with implementing greenfield projects. So we really see it not as an either-or decision. It's really a least regret solution that serves as a complementary hedge for the projects that are recommended by the CAISO staff. So it does provide some optionality. So I want to say thank you to the staff for the engagement prior to and during the comment period. We appreciate and support the recommendation to continue to explore the Warnerville Newark Transmission Expansion Project as a possible extension of this planning cycle. So let's work together. Please, let's not miss this generational opportunity. Don't let it pass you by. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Any questions from the board? Barbara?
No questions, just a comment that it seems like a good opportunity, almost too good to miss. So Neil, I hope that we are going to continue to collaborate and that we have a more defined time frame as to making a decision on this project. And if it provides additional optionalities and it complements everything we're doing while reducing risk and allowing us to meet our policy objectives, it deserves the attention.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Marilyn, how are we doing on online comments?
All right, we do have several folks lined up in the queue. Let's go to our first caller.
Great.
Hina Singh, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Good morning, board members. My name is Hina Singh. I am here today on behalf of the California Environmental Justice Alliance and the Regenerate California Coalition to express my concerns about the CAISO's draft transmission plan for 2024-2025. We believe that the latest transition plan perpetuates the use of gas plants that are long overdue for retirement. Appreciate Board Member Leslie's call out on this. Over half of the state's gas plants are in overburdened environmental justice communities. These are typically low-income communities of color. These communities have borne the brunt of the impacts from fossil fuel infrastructure for decades and continue to experience more health issues and fewer resources to address them. I'm here to provide three main requests that we have. One is that we request the CAISO update the transmission plan to identify specific transmission projects and clean energy projects that are expected to reduce reliance on gas plants in order to comply with SB 887. SB 887 requires the CAISO to identify the highest priority transmission projects needed to reduce reliance on gas plants each year. Two is asking that this plan acknowledge the considerable difference in CPUC emission projections with CAISO's modeling projections, and must commit to closer coordination with CPUC to ensure that resource planning delivers the mandated greenhouse gas requirements. And third is that we recommend updating the economic analysis within this plan to use updated resource adequacy capacity prices so that the economic modeling does not unfairly bias the assessment towards gas plants. We also ask that environmental costs be considered in the economic modeling moving forward, especially to include the impacts of carbon dioxide and NOx emissions on frontline communities. We cannot achieve our clean energy and clean air goals without planning for gas plant retirements. I urge the CAISO to make these changes in the 2024-25 transmission plan and in all future TPP cycles to enable gas plant retirements and be a champion for environmental justice communities. Thank you.
Neil, would you like to respond?
Sure. Yes, so it's Neil here. I would like to respond. So first off, we have agreed to meet and have additional dialogue around the specific concerns about the overall fate of the gas fleet, the pace of retirement, and so forth. But I do also have to chime in and respond to some of the individual comments that there are areas there where additional dialogue may help, but on a number of these, we do have to politely disagree on some of the concerns. Oh, sorry, I'm drifting too far away from the microphone here. Sorry, specifically though, about updating the work we do to assess the impact of transmission on reducing gas-fired generation requirements. We do conduct additional studies beyond those that we're required to do every second year, doing a long-term local capacity technical study, reaching out into the future to assess the impact of transmission development on the long-term local requirements. But I also have to point out that, as we discussed before, the bulk of the requirement right now with the Public Utilities Commission's consideration of the pace of the gas-fired fleet is actually driven by overall system requirements, not local transmission constraints. So while we are trying to provide adequate information about the cost to eliminate reliance in certain areas, we do recognize that that alone will not actually enable the retirement of the gas-fired generation when the CPUC's portfolios are calling for the retention of that gas-fired generation for system requirements. Sorry, Now, that also factors into the cost issue that we consider for local capacity. At the time that we started the transmission plan, we were using the best RA capacity available or price information available at the time. There is more current information available that will be used in future planning cycles. But the one thing I have to add there is, because our assumption going in, based on input from the Public Utilities Commission, is that the gas-fired generation is required in any event, we look at the differential between gas-fired generation in a local capacity area being able to earn a bit of a premium being in the local capacity area. So what's the difference between the local capacity RA cost versus system-wide? So the difference is the important part in our economic analysis as opposed to the absolute value. So we will be looking to update that information, but we're not seeing that we don't expect it to have a huge impact on our overall results. Now, the other issue about environmental and other, I'll say, non-electric costs, that's always been a delicate issue for us because in that regard, and this is one we do see more discussion being necessary on, but our traditional approach has been to, in our economic studies, consider the cost of delivered electricity in our economic analysis. Other societal costs are real and need to be considered, but in our view, that is the purview of the Public Utilities Commission in making those broader resource decisions, as opposed to the ISO imposing our own societal judgments on other inputs into the economic studies. So that's where we, like I said, our goal there is to work in partnership with the Public Utilities Commission, provide meaningful transmission impact, but not usurp their role as the entity giving us the state policy direction. I think those are the main points I wanted to touch on, but I just wanted to reinforce we are committed to continuing the dialogue with Hina and the rest of her group. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Angelina, you wanted to comment?
Yes, I just wanted to go back to what I had said early in the, yes, it's on. What I had mentioned early in the day as well. Of course, we're committed to making sure that we have the lowest impact and that we benefit all residents and citizens of California and with our projects and the transmission plan that we have. And I think point in case, the fact that we are integrating renewables and that we are actively displacing fossil energy on a daily basis at large percentages, including over 90% today, is a testament to the success and will continue par for the course. We have a goal in front of us of carbon neutrality by 2045, as Mary Leslie pointed out. And I think the ISO and everybody here is committed to achieving that goal and doing everything possible to make sure that we get there and thereby benefiting everybody statewide.
Thank you, Angelina. Any other comments? Okay, let's go to the next person.
All right, connection for Ed Shikata.
Good morning, Adam. Audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Governors. My name is Ed Shikata. I'm the Palo Alto City Manager. On behalf of the City of Palo Alto, I would like to thank the CAISO Board and staff for your thorough work on the transmission plan. We support the new Ames Distribution to Palo Alto transmission project recommended in this plan, as it is critically important to reliability in Palo Alto for our utilities customers, given that the entire city currently relies on a single transmission corridor adjacent to the Palo Alto Airport. As hopefully you know, Palo Alto is home to many world-class companies and research facilities such as Varian Medical Systems, Broadcom, Hewlett-Packard, Tesla, and other high-impact customers such as the Veterans Administration Hospital and Stanford Medical Center. In 2010, a small airplane crash took out lines in this transmission corridor, resulting in a 10-hour citywide blackout and the near evacuation of the hospitals, including the Regional Level 1 Trauma Center. In 2021, another plane crash narrowly missed cutting off electricity to the city once again and was extremely close to compromising the broader PG&E electric grid. The city has explored several options in the years that have transpired and strongly supports the recommended project. We have also seen a 10% load growth in the last 12 months, primarily due to data centers in early stages of development, as well as ongoing citywide electrification initiatives that reduce our reliance on gas. Our electric utility is growing even faster than forecasts when we worked with CEC staff last year. On schedule, would like to note Mr. Millar's earlier comments, and we appreciate CAISO's commitment to working with PG&E on the schedule, and the city will also be happy to support expediting the work involved. So once again, the city strongly supports the CAISO staff recommendation to approve the Ames to Palo Alto 115 kV project, and I and staff would be happy to respond to any questions. Thank you, Chair and Governors.
Thank you, Ed. 10% load growth in 12 months. Wow. I guess that is part of having lower rates than your IOU around you.
Compliment.
Any other comments? Okay, next commenter, please.
Moving on to Susan Schneider.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Susan Schneider, Phoenix Consulting. I'm representing the Large Scale Solar Association, or LSA, today. Our comments focus on the proposed transmission plan deliverability, or TPD, reservations for certain flavored resource types, like long lead time resources that's in the revised plan. We do appreciate the additional transparency provided in the plan about these set-asides for these favored resources, but we have two main concerns. We have other concerns as well, but we don't have time to discuss those in 3 minutes. But our first concern, our big concern, is the transparency provided for these reservations in the plan is not very transparent. The revised transmission plan shows nearly 12,000 megawatts of reserve deliverability that will be held back from the market for as much as 15 years, and only by general locations. For example, the figures show over 3,000 megawatts of deliverability reserved at Palo Verde, but a reservation at Palo Verde will reduce available deliverability at every substation between Palo Verde and the major load centers downstream, including Colorado River, Red Bluff, Devers, Valley, Albert Hill, and other major substations. The transmission plan does not show the impacts at any downstream substations. Second, LSA continues to question the need for these TPD reservations and is alarmed at both the current magnitude and the potential for increased reservations in the future. The CAISO has asserted a need for these reservations, but has yet to hold a serious conversation in the stakeholder process about that need. For example, solar, wind, and storage resources have developed freely in the past to date without the need for deliverability set-asides. The adverse impact of the set-asides is magnified under the CAISO's new interconnection request intake process, which limits capacity accepted for study based on available deliverability at each location. So these reservations will greatly limit the resource types and locations that could be accommodated in the future at all of these affected substations. Moreover, new rules implemented in the CAISO initiatives over the past several years have reduced the need for any such actions. Under these rules, generation and storage projects will require executed power purchase agreements to acquire and hold TPD allocations. The major load-serving entities that account for virtually all PPAs have detailed resource procurement mandates from their regulatory authorities. For example, the CPUC has established PPA targets for over 30 load-serving entities by year for zero emitting capacity, long-duration storage, long lead time resources, local capacity resources, and renewable energy more generally. Resource types that exceed the detailed mandates established by these regulatory authorities by significant amounts will simply not secure PPAs and therefore will not be able to secure or hold TPD allocations. Thus, that deliverability will be available for these favored resource types without the need to wall off thousands of megawatts of capacity and shut out other resources from even entering the queue. Finally, LSA is also alarmed at the increased potential for harm in the next TPD cycle from this approach. The CAISO signals in the transmission plan its intent to follow this same TPD reservation process in the 2025-2026 planning cycle for the additional resource and types and locations indicated in CPUC decision 2502-026. Among other things, that decision asks the CAISO to refrain from approving any new transmission for a significant portion of the recommended base portfolio due to uncertainty. Well, under no circumstances should the CAISO reserve deliverability for any resources that the CPUC believes to be so uncertain that they cannot be used to justify any new transmission. Otherwise, such additional reservations will further erode the deliverability available for other resource types. That concludes our concerns. We have voiced these concerns in the past. They're only magnitude by the information that's included in this transmission plan and the indications of how that might be applied going forward. I'd be happy to address any questions or concerns that the board members may have about this.
Thank you, Susan. That was a lot. Can I ask?
3 minutes.
You did not file a letter. And certainly, I don't expect that you think that we board members could absorb that from your very impressive speed reading. Why didn't you file a letter that expressed these concerns?
Well, we have expressed these same concerns in the past. We did submit a letter for the draft transmission plan and have not seen those concerns addressed. So we took the opportunity to come and talk to you about those things directly, but it was pretty much the same points we made in the last letter. And we think once the when the work goes a little further in the next TPP cycle, we'll really start to see some more of these concerns arise. But it's not that different from what we had said last time. So we came here, we summarized the points. Pretty much what's in the final plan is what was in the draft plan. So we didn't feel the necessity to send another letter.
I will just say for myself, and I can't speak for the other board members, that I'm much more likely to be able to absorb your points in written form than at the board meeting in a 3-minute dash. But I appreciate your input.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, yes, it's Neil here, and I just wanted to comment that we will be, of course, exploring these concerns as we move forward in the 25-26 transmission plan. The latest portfolios from the Public Utilities Commission are identifying the potential for additional holding back of capacity, and we appreciate those concerns and want to work through that. We do believe, though, that the capacity requirements, the capacity that has been reserved through this transmission plan is entirely appropriate. There's always this issue for us that, and including the changes we've made most recently to our interconnection process, that those processes really focus on moving winnowing down from a very large number of relatively similar competing projects, solar storage projects that can be built much more quickly, whereas the transmission capacity can take longer to put in place, versus we also do recognize we have these other types of technologies, such as offshore wind, that cannot pivot with the same speed. They cannot get a contract approved in 1 year and be built online 2 years later. So we do have clearly these different requirements that we're trying to manage, but recognizing that our interconnection process and the competition for available capacity is geared around these larger, more nimble projects, but there's also a clear state policy requirement for some of these other resource types that have much different characteristics in their development and contracting processes, and that we ultimately need to be successful overall meeting the state's needs.
Thank you, Neil. That was,
Sorry, Angelina's already going.
sorry, that was really useful, and it's good to hear. Portfolio diversity is important, and we can understand that there's different timelines for different projects, yet these concerns are also valid. So in the next briefings and updates, if you could tell us what the impact would be and what we should be anticipating and why certain choices were made, that would be great. Thank you.
Please do.
And Susan, appreciate your comments. Thanks.
Okay.
Dan.
Yeah, thank you. Yes,
Closer to the
Susan, thank you for your comments. I appreciate that that you have made similar comments in the past, and we listened then and we're listening today. The message I take from your comments is that from my perspective, you are reinforcing the need for us to remain very closely tied to and aligned with the Public Utilities Commission. And we recognize that the processes that they are going through, they're going to be updating their assumptions and their philosophy in terms of meeting the state's policy goals for renewables, but also assuring that we have a diverse portfolio with various options that will help assure that we keep the lights on while we move to this new future. So thank you for your comments today, and you're simply making sure that we continue that alignment, and I think that commitment's been made. Thanks.
Okay, Marilyn, do we have more people?
Yes, we do. Moving on to Chris Carwick.
Good morning, Board of Governors. My name is Chris Carwick, and I am an Assistant Director for Silicon Valley Power. Silicon Valley Power is the electric utility for the city of Santa Clara, with a service territory of approximately 19.2 square miles. SVP's customer base is made up of 92% industrial and roughly 6% residential, with a peak load of 713 megawatts. The South Bay area is served by 3 major sources: Newark Substation, Los Esteros Substation, and Metcalf Substation. SVP operates in this area with 3 receiving stations supplied from the PG&E 230 kV and 115 kV systems. SVP is thankful for the opportunity to provide verbal comments in addition to our submittal of written comments discussing the reliability assessment and study updates dated November 5th, 2024, supporting the CAISO proposed hybrid transmission project, the first two elements of which were approved by the CAISO board in November of 24. The third element of the hybrid project includes a high-capacity 230 kVA C circuit between PG&E's San Jose B and SVP's NRS substation. We support the approval of this project, which would increase SVP's import capability and improve the San Jose area's overall reliability. SVP would like to highlight that these new projects need to be supported by additional reinforcements on the 115 system in the South Bay overall system. SVP fully supports the CAISO recommendation to approve the Kiefer receiving station to FMC 115 line reconductoring as part of the South Bay reinforcement project scope. SVP wants to stress, though, it is the right decision to align the project with the Trimble San Jose 115 kV line reconductoring, which is also included in the South Bay reinforcement project, as they share common underground and overhead sections. Focused on the KRS to FMC 115 reconductoring project, the CAISO has proposed reconductoring the line to at least 1,400 amps or 279 MVA under summer emergency conditions. Based on SVP's analysis, SVP had hoped for a higher line rating from the reconductor with 2,000 amps or 400 MVA. SVP encourages ongoing discussion to refine design details during the project scoping phase, later with CAISO and PG&E. As the CAISO is aware, SVP's load is expected to grow significantly during SVP's 10-year planning horizon, primarily driven by hyperscale data centers. Specifically, SVP's 10-year planning horizon anticipates SVP's 1 in 10 peak load forecast to increase to 1,636 megawatts by 2035. For perspective, SVP's current peak load is 713 megawatts. Lastly, SVP wishes to express gratitude for CAISO's focus on addressing the transmission capacity deficit in the San Jose area, particularly as it relates to SVP's service territory. SVP looks forward to working closely with PG&E, LS Power, and the CAISO to ensure that the multiple transmission upgrades are built in a timely manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's Neil here. I think we can explore that in the project scoping downstream of the approval. So that's something we can continue to look at. The capacity issue was one that was not mentioned in the original letter, but we can follow up on that.
Okay, thank you. Marilyn?
All right, next is Scott Ranzel.
A quick mic check.
Welcome back, Scott.
Thank you. Scott Ranzel, thank you, Board of Governors, for giving me the opportunity to speak about the transmission plan. PG&E is here to express its support for the 2024-2025 transmission plan. We want to applaud CAISO on its diligent work on this year's plan and call out the commitment to the Greater Bay Area, including San Jose, has been talked about already. It is certainly valued by PG&E and many others in the area. PG&E is excited to continue to work with its vast number of stakeholders to execute efficiently and effectively to deliver safe, reliable, and affordable power on these plans and all the other transmission efforts it's engaged in to all of its California customers. We appreciate this effort to improve the reliability and capacity of the electric grid. Happy to take any questions. Otherwise, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Scott. Being no questions or comments, Marilyn, let's move to the next.
All right, we have next Ashley Hernandez.
Hello?
Please go ahead,
Just
Ashley,
wanna-
we can hear you.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning, and board members. My name is Ashley Hernandez. I am a resident in Wilmington, California, and I've had the chance to participate in a lot of work with Communities for a Better Environment. I'm here today on behalf of Regenerate California to express my disappointment and concerns about the CAISO's draft transmission plan for 2024 and 2025. The latest transmission plan perpetuates the use of gas plants that are long overdue for retirement in my community. And I fully support a true clean energy for California to get to where it needs to be to retire these power plants as soon as possible. Gas plants disproportionately impact communities like mine. I live in Wilmington, and we have a generating station that we've been told was going to be retired, only for other alternatives that are just as worse to come in. Over half of the state's gas plants are already in overburdened environmental injustice communities, typically low-income communities of color. These communities have borne the brunt of the impact of fossil fuel infrastructure for decades and continue to experience the health issues and fewer resources to address them. So I'm going to urge CAISO to make the changes in its 2024-2025 transmission plan. There's still time, and in all future TPP cycles to enable gas plant retirements and be a real champion to environmental justice communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just feel compelled to say something. Thank you very much for those comments. And I think we should be focusing, Ashley and all the EJ activists are keenly aware of the impacts on local communities and air quality on local communities. And as we transition and integrate more renewables and have plans to reach the state goals, as we've said, pointing out that now we're at 98% renewables on the grid. It may also be useful to show a graph of the reduced use of fossil generation in California over time and the impact that that has. I think it would be useful information to share with communities, so we can not only be cognizant of the fact of the progress that has been made, but also identify issues where we need to maybe have a sharper focus to do our jobs better. And have a greater impact. And of course, again, we need to coordinate with the CEC and the PUC and all the plans that they also have to ensure that we're operating a reliable, a resilient, and increasingly cleaner grid. So thank you for all the hard work for the ISO, and there's always room to improve, and we certainly will do that.
Okay, Ashley, let's go to the next commenter. Or Ashley, Marilyn, let's go to the, sorry.
No problem. There actually are no further comments.
Okay, no further comments. Any further comments from board members?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Roger.
Thank you, Chair Borenstein. The short motion, move that the ISO Board of Governors approves the ISO's 2024-2025 transmission plan attached in the memorandum dated May 14, 2025. Motion?
Moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Jan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Governors. The motion passes.
So we move to item 8, briefing on summer loads and resource assessment, and Neil's going to kick this off.
Yes. But unlike last year at this time, I don't also have an interconnection process decision item. So we've really dialed back our workload at the, no, but all joking aside, actually the last item I will be bringing up today is that I will be asking now Aditya Jayaprabhakar, our Director of Resource Assessment and Planning, to provide a briefing on the ISO's 2025 summer assessment. The work that Aditya will be showing here demonstrates the continued progress we're making in adding new resources to the grid and continuing to firm up the reliability of the overall fleet, as well as the trend of aligning the principles and management of the summer assessment with other resource planning activities. So with that, I'll ask Aditya to walk through the briefing. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Good morning, Chair and Board of Governors. Next slide, please. Performing a loads and resources assessment is one of the many things we do in preparation for upcoming summer. One of the things that we look at is the resource additions from last summer to this summer. We've added about 3,300 megawatts of resources already and then expect an addition of another 2,000 megawatts of resources by June 30th. This is all in nameplate capacity that translates to around 4,300 megawatts of NQC megawatts of resources. Our September peak load forecast, which comes from our CEC, California Energy Commission's IPO forecast, shows a 46,094 megawatts for this year. From a high-level weather outlook standpoint, it looks like a front-loaded hot summer and chances of above normal temperatures likely June through August. From looking at the water levels in our reservoirs, our conditions for hydro is looking more like an average hydro situation. Next slide, please. So the analysis includes a probabilistic assessment of all RA eligible resources, the expected 2025 summer fleet to perform a 1 in 10 loss of load expectation planning target. To assess the sufficiency of the fleet, we use LOLE target as a metric of measurement, but what we mean in our interpretation of our application of the target is getting into emergency measures or needing emergency measures to maintain demand and reserves, not actually firm loss of load. So to perform the assessment, we conduct 500 simulations, each with its own wind, solar load and outage profiles with all resource characteristics, go through the full hourly chronological simulation of in all those cases, look at the number of events that had insufficient capacity to meet demand and reserves, do the arithmetic and figure out that the translation of 1 in 10 results in 50 event days of, if you assume that 500 simulations is mimicking 500 years of modeling, and then we calculate a shortfall or surplus that is needed to meet that 0.1 target. Next slide, please. So our analysis shows that there is a surplus capacity of 1,451 megawatts, about what is needed to meet that 0.1 target. I repeat, it's an assessment trying to measure the sufficiency of the fleet to meet that target or getting into emergency measures and not firm loss of load. The risk hours as shown in this heat map show that the known hours 19, 20, 21 to be the risk hours. Obviously, an important caveat to note here is this assessment does not consider coincident extreme events such as west-wide heat waves or major wildfire impacting large amounts of supply. So there are still some extreme events that could pose risk to the grid. Next slide, please. In addition to looking at that probabilistic assessment, we also try to look at the fleet characteristics and observe if you put them all on a stack view, the multi-hour stack, how does the reserves look from every hour standpoint. So what we basically do is we translate the resources that we modeled, determine what its hourly availability, expected availability is, stack it all up, and then if you look at that, the solid line, that is the IPO forecast, and then this fleet shows a healthy margin above that, and basically what is needed to meet a 0.1 LOLE. That translation comes to a 22.67%. Is the way we choose that 22.67%, that's the minimum margin, minimum hourly margin observed over the 24 hours. That becomes your planning reserve margin, if you will, and that number. So over all the hours, you show a good surplus available, expected surplus available from these resource fleet. Another point to note is that dash line, which is showing what would be shown to the ISO. At the local regulatory authorities, each have their own planning reserve margin requirements. If you take all of that and translate to a CAISO-wide equivalent number, that is that 16.7%. So there is enough RA capacity available in the system to get us to a 0.1. So overall, as Neil mentioned, we are showing a cautiously optimistic positive outlook for the summer from a resource standpoint. Next slide, please. Another preview of the weather heat maps. The seasonal temperature outlook map shown on the right implies that the probabilistic chance of higher than normal temperatures is higher. It's a mouthful of probabilities. Higher probability of higher temperatures is higher in the Intermountain West, and the probability of a higher temperature is lower in the coastal regions. So, but the observation is it looks like a hot summer front-loaded is the point to remember, is what the forecasters are indicating for this summer conditions. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned earlier, extreme drought, wildfires, and potential for widespread heat events continue to pose risks to the grid. But to safeguard against these extreme measures, we have strategic reserves available to us again in 2025. There are different kinds of emergency programs that are available. The largest of that is the Electricity Supply Strategic Reliability Reserve Program, about 3,000 megawatts. And then you get 300 megawatts of additional supply expected in the emergency assistance on the interties category. There are other demand response programs with the Emergency Load Reduction Program and demand side grid support. So all in all, from the analysis, it looks like we are projecting a sufficient amount of capacity going into the summer. Our assumptions and modeling has been vetted and worked with stakeholders over the last few months, and all of that is incorporated in the summer assessment. So cautiously optimistic summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Mary.
I like cautiously optimistic. I'd like solidly optimistic much better. So in the spirit of cautiously optimistic, what could go wrong?
It's Neil here. I'll take a first shot at that. In terms of what could go wrong, I think the extreme weather events, climate change is real and it's been hitting California particularly hard. We've all been experiencing these extremes that are beyond those that are included in normal traditional planning based on, I'll say, historically averaged conditions and reasonable distributions of expectations. So, you identified the one scenario of a widespread heat wave that also goes along with creating wildfires that start taking out major corridors. That is not something that we can traditionally plan for resource capacity. We do have the strategic reserves to help additional margin, and then we prepare for the summer extensively, both us as well as the state agencies, on emergency preparation. But, when it refers to cautiously optimistic, under all the normal metrics, we're going into the summer with a good fleet, well-maintained, adequate capacity, but Mother Nature's not happy and can surprise us.
No, I think that's right, Neil. The other question I have, though, is that strategic reserve isn't like, it doesn't energize right away. That's our once through cooling and a bunch of other things. It would take days to tee up, right?
That's correct. I think the key thing, certainly, typically, if we're going to enter into a prolonged westwide event that really taxes California and other parts of the region, we tend to get a little bit of visibility into that coming. And so what we call our sort of our plan, our playbook for the summer has very specific sets of trigger criteria that we would use to start informing the OTC units if we need them. So we'll be able to have a several-day advance notice. They get tested, check for tube leaks or any other issues to make sure they're ready to go. And then we can get them brought up to their what's known as their dispatchable PMIN and ready to go. So that is correct. Obviously, if we're in a situation where we get a real set of coincident contingencies of fast developing fire, tripping of transmission lines, then the OTCs are not going to be available. But for the kind of events like we saw in 2022 or 2020, we should have some advance notice of that and have enough time to get them spinning to be deployed if necessary.
That's good news, but let's see, we did not declare any flex alerts last year.
No, we have not had a flex alert since 2022, last 2 years. Yep.
That's good. So if we did start to have to issue flex alerts, that would also be part of our warning system.
100%. Yeah. And we are, again, the state in cooperation with the PUC, there will be a very robust communication program around flex alerts. If we have to use them, we have, again, discrete criteria for calling on them. Obviously, we're just always need to be ready. That's the key thing. The cautious guarded optimism is, the base case, and a pretty good realm of the distribution looks good, but we've been there before. We know, and you've seen the map. If that big high pressure system decides to sit over the top of the West and bake for 3, 4, 5, 6 days, those are stress grid conditions. So we're ready for it. And I think really proud of the team in terms of all the rehearsal and the scenario analysis.
Get that with the stress and the stress conditions, you could also get a couple of fires around large transmission lines to boot, then you'd have a perfect storm.
Yeah, 2021 bootleg fire taught us that lesson. So we're definitely ready. And I'd just like to thank Aditya. If I could just offer one other thing, for the partnership around resource adequacy in California, as you all know, it's a multi-pronged partnership, right? With the state agencies have very, very critical responsibilities vis-a-vis the IRP and the RA program administration. What we do and will continue to do is to try to provide intellectually honest, transparent information about what we see as loss load expectation for the footprint, to get that information into the mix, and then just to also administer sufficiency tests and evaluate the forward showings to make sure that folks are meeting their obligations and that we're continuing to establish a solid planning reserve margin for the state. So it's been a good collaboration. Aditya is still a relatively new member of the team doing a fabulous job, and I'm very proud of the level of analytical rigor that we've brought to this realm. And this year's, I think, Loads and Resources study is a nice fresh look, and we were able to portray this information to the Assembly a couple weeks ago, and I think was well received. So thanks again to the team.
Joe.
Aditya, I have a question. You had a slide where you said we had 1,500 megawatts of margin. That's the margin before we get to the flex alert types of activities. So then my question is how much margin do we have going into last year? Is this an increase? I know there's been a lot of load growth, but then I saw those resource additions that you had in that first slide. So how does it this year compare to last year going into summer?
Thank you for that question. Last year, we were assessing what is called as the adjusted preferred system portfolio, the CPUC's plan that goes into the transmission planning process. And based on stakeholder feedback, we've pivoted to assessing RA eligible resources only. So we are not taking stock of all resources, but just looking only at RA eligible resources. So there are additionally energy only resources which are not part of this assessment. Strategic reserves are obviously not part of the assessment. So and then we've also updated the representation of the resources in the production cost model, which with all the operating parameters of resources to reflect the last 3 years of outages, for example, which was not continuously updated previously. So factoring in actual resource performance, only analyzing the RA eligible fleet, and also trying to ensure the demand plus reserves, and not just focusing on demand and getting into emergency EEA conditions, really kind of gives us that solid picture. So going back to Governor Leslie's question, we are more solidly cautiously optimistic than we were
Well, that's
last
what I'm trying
year.
to get at, is I'm trying to help Mary out here.
Yeah.
Is 1,500 megawatts, all these other changes considered,
Yeah.
a higher margin going into this summer or a lower margin compared to last year?
Numerically lower, but that is counterintuitive on the first look. But I think we are in a much better space.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
So
and
more
it's
solidly optimistic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Neil here. I just wanted to paraphrase yes, as you mentioned, last year we were actually showing a higher margin above meeting a 1 in 10 than this year. But part of that is because of these additional measures that were baked into the study to be more realistic about the contributions of certain resource types, more realistic about forced outage rates and updating that information. So that additional improvement in accuracy improves our comfort levels around the results, but it did have the effect of pulling down the amount of additional margin above the 1 in 10 that we were showing numerically.
Yeah, no, that was, the
Yes.
number's lower, but the confidence is higher.
The
That's gonna
confidence
really
is much
be
higher because of this more robust
what I
modeling.
wanted to hear. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Can I ask, setting aside wildfires actually taking out lines, why aren't we modeling west-wide and coincident? It seems like that's a pretty important factor and one that, unlike wildfires, which I understand are harder to predict, are not that I mean, at least statistically, to analyze the rest of the West. Is the idea that we're counting contracts, and so in some sense we know what we can get? And then related to that, how big a share is this? So at the net peak on a hot summer afternoon, what share is imports?
Well, you can give the exact numbers, but I would just start by saying that the approach we take, because the modeling of the entire West also includes many more parameters that would all be subject to interpretation and estimation, we do our analysis assuming some reasonably conservative amount of import as a baseline assumption into the probabilistic analysis, and take that as a way to articulate where we're at in the overall scheme of things. But then when you're talking about, well, what are the probabilities of a West-wide event? Once you get beyond, and I do need to draw a distinction between the probabilistic analysis techniques that are based on having some history, some distribution of events, what's your likelihood of having that event, and baking those probabilities into your calculation. When you start talking about a truly extreme event, a 1 in 100-year event, you simply don't have a track record of how to factor the probability of that event and how the system would respond into a normal probabilistic analysis. So the probabilistic analysis does a great job around a reasonable range of foreseeable events. But once you start looking at these truly extreme outliers, then you just start to have to make a deterministic assessment about what's the risk you're exposed to, what insurance do you have, what do your strategic reserves look like, what's your preparedness operationally to respond under those kind of events. There just isn't sufficient track record and information to build truly extreme events into a probabilistic analysis and get a meaningful outcome. Now, about the import.
But just to push it back a little bit, last year, I think it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, the rest of the West had record levels.
Yes.
Those were not, in some sense, 1 in 100 events. They were just load growth. And they are correlated with California load. So we do have a fair amount of data on the general correlation. And I think we're not using it. Is that right?
Well, I think I would challenge that one data point doesn't give you a correlation.
No, I'm saying that there are many data points where we have west-wide heat storms.
And that's what we use to factor in what's a reasonable import assumption to use in the cases.
So we are using those.
But we make an assessment of what's a reasonable import number to use, as opposed to trying to do a complete probabilistic analysis for the entire Western footprint, just to capture an import assumption. So there is a balance there of how far you go in the model build versus, and get a meaningful result versus making some assumptions about what a reasonable import level is and then focusing on our own capabilities around that import level.
And Neil, is there a distribution around the import assumptions when you're running 10 LOLE assessment?
They are using different assumptions for different hours of the day, and Adit, you could speak to that.
Yeah, if you think about what is shown to us in a September peak month kind of situation, we see about 7,000 megawatts of import resources shown in our RA construct. But when you look at what we model, it is 5,500 megawatts. So 1,500 megawatts comes from known resource-specific imports, and 4,000 is what comes from non-resource-specific imports coming into the CAISO system. That is also only, that 5,500 megawatts is restricted to the hours 17 to 23, and it goes back to the full available max import capability for the other hours of the day. So that import constraint is an important variable that we can tweak. So if I shave off the 1,500 megawatt surplus that we saw, basically the import is going down from 5,500 to 4,000, while we, on a good day in the RA showings process, go all the way to 7,000 megawatts.
Okay, so am I right to just say that during a really bad summer day, during the net peak, the ballpark is 10 to 15% of the power that's the electricity being delivered is imports. I'm doing 5,500 over 50,000, right? Roughly. Okay, good. Thank you. Did you want to say something else?
I think that's in your picture, Aditya, on your multi-hour stack analysis, where you show the reduction in imports during that evening ramp hours.
Okay.
That adjustment was also based on Chair Bodenstein's question last year when I was here, so.
That's right. Okay, we are right on time, I believe. And we move to item 9, informational reports. Wait, did I miss something?
It looks like you did. I'm sorry. and I
Oh, there's
fell
public
asleep at the
comment on
switch,
some of
yes.
those. Okay. No public comment within the room. Marilyn, could you see if there's any public comment online?
Before we go to our caller, a reminder to everyone to enter the public comment line. Please click the raise hand icon on the bottom center of your Zoom screen. When it's your turn to speak, please approve the host request on your screen to be unmuted, then state your full name, affiliation, and question. Okay, let's go to Edward Smeloff.
Good afternoon, President Bornstein and members of the Board of Governors. Appreciate the opportunity. Very impressive work on this analysis of summer loads. I have kind of 2 fundamental questions I'd like to put in front of the Board of Governors. So first of all, we all know that there is a trade-off between reliability and affordability. You know, we want to have high levels of reliability, but we can't have perfect reliability. We have to accept some risks. So we do that by setting the planning reserve margin. And I was interested to see that you have 2 planning reserve margins that were put forward on that stack that was presented. One, which is the planning reserve margin, which the load serving entities are going to be held to in terms of their procurement. And then the other is a higher effective planning reserve margin. And the difference between those is pretty significant. It's about 6%, you know, to get from 16.7 to 22.5%. So the question I have, and this may be also for the PUC, is has anyone quantified what are the impacts? What are the costs of maintaining that higher 22.5% effective reliability, that it goes beyond what is required based on the LOLE analysis? So that's one question. Can someone quantify that and tell us what the cost implications of this higher reserve margin is? My second question is related. So you have a strategic reliability reserve, which is outside of the market, which can be called on during emergency situations. Wasn't called on in the last 2 years because of flex alerts. That strategic reliability reserve is mainly very old ones through cooling power plants that have had their operations extended through 2026. It's about 3,000 megawatts of that. So you are counting that as sort of a backup standby asset. But those contracts go away in 2026. What happens in 2027? Presumably, you still have the risk of, smoke underneath transmission lines and extreme weather events. So what kind of transition is being made for the strategic reliability reserve to be one that's more durable and resilient, that relies on demand response and virtual power plants and consumer actions rather than on power plants that need to be retired, that aren't very effective, that don't ramp quickly, that take a long time to start up? So I know that's a joint question that applies to the other state agencies, but it's not too early to begin thinking about the strategic reliability reserve and what happens to it in the future, what is its proper size, and what is its proper composition. Appreciate
Neil,
the
why don't you
opportunity to ask these
take the first part?
questions, and I understand they're complicated, but I do think they're important to be answered over time.
Neil, why don't you take the first part of the question about the PRM, and I can handle the second part.
Sure. Thanks, Elliot. Yes, it's Neil here. I'll start with on the PRM discussion. So I need to be clear that, or just reiterate what Aditya said. The 16.7% planning reserve margin he showed is the weighted value coming out of what the local regulatory authorities have accumulatively set for themselves. So that is the result of their input, the weighted average of what the collective RA program would be looking to achieve based on planning reserve margins set by the LRAs. Those planning reserve margins do not necessarily achieve the 1 in 10 LOLE target that is used in the integrated resource planning process, and that we also believe is an appropriate level of reliability that should be achieved. The other planning reserve margin was the back calculation of the fleet that it would take to provide that 1 in 10 loss of load expectation. And as you pointed out, there is a gap there. And the gap is then obviously a topic in the CPUC's resource adequacy proceedings, as well as in the integrated resource planning process. Our summer assessment work, though, regardless of how resources came to be, our summer assessment is really assessing what are the conditions we're looking at based on what did get built and is under construction and will be available by this summer to draw on. So I think that's the first part. Elliot,
Yeah,
if you wanted to pick up.
On the question of the strategic reserve, what we have, as Ed mentioned, the state agencies with the CEC heavily in the lead, and also the CPUC have been the entities that have really driven the discussion to date around the size and composition of the strategic reserve. What we have tried to do is position ourselves to be able to very efficiently dispatch those resources when necessary. And so, again, last year, as you recall, we did not have to actually dispatch the OTCs, but we did bring them into spin condition a couple of times just in case, especially around some wildfire issues and things like that. I would say that going forward, I know that the state agencies in consultation with us are now actively thinking about the next iteration of the strategic reserve, recognizing that some of those resources are likely to expire at the end of next year. And I know that already the strategic reserve is a combination of supply side and demand side resources. And I think there's the next set of how can we replace that? How do we augment it? And how do you make it as cost effective as possible for, the broader tax base that's paying for it. So those conversations are underway. And Ed, I'd encourage you to also reach out to Vice Chair Gunda and others at the commission who are really thinking that through. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Marilyn, are there any other comments on the line?
Marilyn?
Marilyn? Did our time end?
Apologies for that. No further
Sorry.
comments on the line.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next item is informational reports. Are there questions, comments on the informational reports in the board book? Mary?
I just have one comment, Roger. The regulatory report I thought was excellent. You've achieved a lot. You're not talking about it today, but you got the first phase of our pathways approved and many other things. Do you
Well,
wanna say a few words?
thank you. I have an awesome team, and so they get full credit.
And in the spirit of my updates today, we just hit 100% renewables on the grid. So congratulations, everyone.
Okay, that takes care of item 8, I think. And
Do I
so
owe
we
you
are
lunch
to
now,
item
Mary?
9.
That was item 9.
Oh,
Actually,
that was item 9.
10 is
Okay.
whether there's any future agenda items.
Hearing none, I think we can adjourn.
I think we're doing good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.